Mom, who locked this little black girl in the kitchen? The voice echoed through the big, marble-covered hallway like a thunderclap. It was Chloe, a young woman with blonde hair tied neatly behind her head, wearing an expensive designer coat. She had just walked into her mother's mansion and was stunned by what she saw. Behind the cold steel bars of the kitchen door, a little black girl sat quietly on the floor, her knees pulled to her chest, her tiny eyes staring up, confused and frightened. The sight didn't match the shiny chandeliers, the sparkling white floors, or the golden-framed family pictures hanging proudly in the hallway. It didn't make sense at all. The girl couldn't have been more than 8 years old. Her little dress was worn out, her hair tangled, and her hands clutched a chipped plastic cup of water. She wasn't crying. She wasn't screaming. She just looked tired. Chloe's heart raced. "Mom," she repeated, louder now. "Why is there a little black girl locked in the kitchen?" But her mother, Margaret, a gray-haired woman in pearls and a stiff navy blue dress, stood frozen. Her lips trembled. Her fingers gripped the edge of the stair railing, and her face paled like she had just seen a ghost. For a long moment, silence filled the house. The only sound was the ticking of the golden clock above the fireplace. Then Margaret finally spoke, her voice low, shaking, almost like she wanted to bury it deep inside herself. She's not supposed to be here." Chloe's eyes widened in disbelief. "What do you mean she's not supposed to be here?" Chloe demanded, her voice rising. "Mom, she's a child." Margaret's hand shook so badly she dropped her pearl bracelet. It rolled across the floor and clinked against a marble tile. "I told you not to come today," Margaret whispered, her voice breaking. And just like that, before Chloe could ask another question, the little girl inside the kitchen slowly stood up. She walked close to the bars, her tiny fingers wrapping around the cold iron. Her lips parted, and for the first time, she spoke. "My name is Kayla," she said softly. The room went still. Chloe felt her stomach twist, her throat tighten. She looked at her mother, then back at the child. None of this made sense. And then, at that exact moment, someone knocked heavily on the front door. The knock wasn't gentle. It was strong, demanding, almost like whoever was outside knew exactly what was happening inside the house. Chloe froze. Margaret's face went even paler. Kayla's little hands clung to the bars tighter. The knock came again, this time louder. Bang, bang, bang. Chloe whispered, "Mom, who's at the door?" Margaret didn't answer. She just stood there, shaking. And that's when Chloe realized whatever truth was hiding in this house, it was bigger, darker, and far more shocking than she could have ever imagined. The story doesn't end there. Let's rewind a little, back to the beginning. Before Chloe ever walked into that house, before the kitchen door was locked, before the little girl named Kayla whispered her name, Margaret wasn't always like this. She used to be known in town as one of the most respected women in Willow Creek. Her late husband, Thomas, had built a fortune in construction, turning a small family company into one of the largest in the state. Their mansion on Ridgewood Hill was a symbol of wealth, class, and untouchable success. But behind the shiny windows and endless parties, not everything was perfect. Margaret was a woman who liked control, from the way the servants polished the silver spoons, to how the roses in the garden were trimmed, to the way her daughter Chloe's hair was brushed before school. Everything had to be done her way. Chloe had grown up in luxury, but also under rules so tight they almost suffocated her. As a child, she often wondered why her friends' houses felt warm and noisy, while hers felt cold and strict, like living in a museum. Still, Margaret made sure Chloe had the best schools, the best dresses, and the best opportunities. To outsiders, she was a perfect mother. To Chloe, she was a woman of iron. But everything started to change when Thomas died. The mansion grew quieter. Margaret's rules grew stricter. And most of all, her secrets began to grow. At first, Chloe didn't notice. She was busy building her own life in New York, working as a fashion buyer, traveling, meeting people, and escaping the tight grip of her childhood home. She would visit on holidays, sometimes bring gifts, sometimes stay a night, but she never stayed long. Until one winter morning, she decided to surprise her mother. She didn't call. She didn't send a message. She just drove her silver Lexus up the long driveway, excited to spend a quiet weekend back home. She didn't expect to find a locked kitchen door. She didn't expect to see a frightened little girl behind it. And she definitely didn't expect the knocking on the door that followed. But before we get to that, we have to go back a little further, back to when Margaret first met the little girl. Before we dive into today's powerful story, take a moment to tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Your voice matters here. If you believe that kindness and compassion can change lives, give this video a like so more people can see it. And make sure to subscribe, because every day we share inspiring stories that remind us all the power of love, empathy, and hope. It happened on a rainy evening 6 months earlier, and just when the storm seemed like it couldn't get any worse, the mansion's front gates buzzed unexpectedly. Margaret, wrapped in her silk robe, frowned as she walked toward the camera monitor. On the screen, through the heavy rain, she saw a figure standing at the gate. A small figure, a child. The girl's clothes were soaked, her hair plastered to her head, her tiny shoulders trembling in the cold. Margaret's finger hovered over the intercom button. The child raised her head, looked straight at the camera, and whispered something. The microphone barely caught it, but Margaret heard it clearly. "Please help me." That was the night everything began to change. And it was the night Margaret made a choice that would come back to haunt her. But the real question is, what exactly did Margaret do after opening that gate? Because whatever it was, it led directly to the moment when Chloe would stand in the hallway months later, staring at Kayla trapped in the kitchen, asking, "Mom, who locked this little black girl in the kitchen?" And the knock at the door that followed was only the beginning. The banging on the front door grew louder. Bang, bang, bang. The sound carried to the wide marble hallway like thunder, rattling the glass chandeliers and making the walls tremble. Chloe's heart pounded in her chest. She turned sharply toward her mother. "Mom!" she whispered harshly. "Who is that?" Margaret didn't move. Her fingers still clutched the stair railing, her body stiff as stone. She looked like a woman who had been caught in the middle of a crime, one she never wanted anyone to see. The knocks grew stronger. Whoever stood outside wasn't going away. "Open the door, Margaret." A man's voice roared from outside. "I know you're in there." Chloe flinched. The man's voice was deep, commanding, filled with anger. It wasn't the voice of a friend. It wasn't the voice of a deliverer man. It was something else, something dangerous. Kayla, the little black girl behind the kitchen bars, whimpered softly. Her tiny hands tightened around the iron frame as she pressed her body against the door. Chloe rushed to her. "It's okay, sweetie," she whispered, trying to comfort her, though she wasn't even sure it was okay at all. Then she turned back to her mother. "Mom, what is going on? Who is at the door? Why is this child locked in the kitchen?" But Margaret only shook her head, her lips trembling as though words refused to leave her mouth. The knocking stopped suddenly. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. Chloe's ears rang. She could hear her own heartbeat thudding in her chest. Kayla's soft breaths. The faint ticking of the golden clock. Then a voice. Low, steady, and much closer now. "If you don't open this door, Margaret, I'll make sure the whole world knows your secret." Chloe's eyes shot wide open. "Secret?" she whispered to herself. "What secret?" Her head snapped toward her mother. "Mom!" But before Margaret could answer, before Chloe could even take another step, the door handle rattled violently. Someone was trying to force their way in. Chloe gasped and ran toward the door, her instincts pulling her forward. But Margaret's sharp voice cut through the air like a whip. "Don't open it." Chloe stopped in her tracks, frozen by the urgency in her mother's tone. The door shook under the pressure of the man outside. He slammed against it once, twice, 3 times, the wood groaning as if it might split. Kayla screamed, a small high-pitched cry that stabbed straight through Chloe's chest. "Mom!" Chloe shouted. "We can't just leave her here scared. We need to." "Quiet." Margaret snapped, her voice shaking. Her gray eyes darted around the room as if searching for an escape. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the banging stopped again. Silence. For a moment, nobody moved. Then the sound of retreating footsteps crunched over the gravel driveway. A car door slammed shut. An engine roared to life. Tires screeched. Whoever it was had left. Chloe stood frozen, her heart still racing, her body trembling. She didn't dare breathe until the sound of the car faded completely into the distance. Only then did she turn back to her mother. "Mom," she said, her voice low and filled with disbelief. "What was that? Who was that man? And why? Why is there a little girl locked in our kitchen?" Margaret looked at her daughter, and in that moment, her face seemed to collapse. She no longer looked like the proud, polished woman Chloe had always known. She looked smaller, weaker, almost broken. Her lips parted, but before she could speak, Chloe felt a tug on her sleeve. She looked down. Kayla's big brown eyes stared up at her, shimmering with tears. "Please," the little girl whispered, "don't let him come back." Chloe knelt down, her heart twisting painfully. She smoothed Kayla's tangled hair, speaking softly. "Don't worry, sweetheart. I won't let anyone hurt you. I promise." But as the words left her mouth, Chloe realized she didn't even know what danger Kayla was in. She didn't know who that man was. She didn't know what her mother had done. And most of all, she didn't know the truth about how this frightened little girl had ended up inside her family's mansion. The house fell quiet again. After a long silence, Margaret finally turned away from the door and sank heavily into one of the velvet chairs in the living room. She rubbed her temples, muttering something under her breath that Chloe couldn't catch. "Mom," Chloe pressed, standing in front of her now, "you need to explain, right now, who is Kayla? Why is she here? Why is she locked in the kitchen?" Margaret's hands shook as she reached for a glass of water. She took a long sip, her eyes avoiding Chloe's. Finally, she whispered, "You weren't supposed to see her." Chloe's jaw tightened. "Excuse me? She's a child, Mom, not some hidden object, not some secret you can lock away." Margaret's voice cracked. "You don't understand, Chloe." "Then make me understand." The air in the room grew heavy. The silence stretched so long that Chloe thought her mother would never answer. Then, at last, Margaret's eyes flickered toward Kayla. "I found her," she said softly. "On a stormy night. She was standing at our gate, alone, soaked to the bone, begging for help." Chloe's breath caught. "She was just there?" Margaret nodded. "Yes, I brought her inside. I gave her food, a bed, clothes. But then things got complicated." Chloe narrowed her eyes. "Complicated how?" Margaret's fingers tapped nervously against the glass. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "There are people looking for her. Dangerous people. And if they find her here, it will destroy everything. My reputation. Our family name. Everything your father built." Chloe's stomach twisted. "You're worried about your reputation?" she snapped. "There's a child locked in our kitchen like some kind of prisoner, and you're worried about your reputation?" Kayla flinched at the sharpness in Chloe's voice, and Chloe immediately softened. Turning back to the little girl, "I'm sorry, sweetie. I didn't mean to scare you." But inside, her anger burned hotter than ever. Her mother wasn't making sense. She was hiding something big. And that man at the door, whoever he was, he knew. Chloe felt her entire body tense. Something about the situation was darker than she could have ever imagined, and she wasn't about to let her mother keep it buried. The rest of the evening dragged slowly, filled with tension so thick it felt like the walls themselves were closing in. Margaret refused to speak more. Every time Chloe pressed, her mother would shake her head and mutter, "It's too dangerous," and fall silent again. Kayla ate quietly, nibbling at a slice of bread Chloe had given her. She didn't complain. She didn't ask questions. She just watched everything, as though trying to measure whether she was truly safe here. By nightfall, Chloe tucked Kayla into the small guest room upstairs, despite Margaret's protests. "She can't sleep there," Margaret hissed. "She's not sleeping in the kitchen." Chloe shot back firmly. Margaret's lips trembled, but she didn't argue further. For a while, the house grew quiet. The only sounds were the ticking clock and the soft hum of the night wind outside. Chloe sat awake in her old childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling, her thoughts racing. Who was the man at the door? Why did he say her mother had a secret? And why was Kayla, this sweet, frightened child, caught in the middle of it all? She didn't have the answers. Not yet, but she intended to find them. The next morning, Chloe woke early to the smell of breakfast. Pancakes, bacon, and eggs, just like when she was a kid. Margaret was in the kitchen, humming softly as though the events of the night before hadn't happened. Her pearls glimmered at her neck, her hair pinned neatly back, her apron spotless. "Good morning, dear," Margaret said warmly, placing a plate on the table. Chloe narrowed her eyes. "Don't good morning me, Mom. We're not pretending everything is normal." Margaret's smile faltered, but she didn't reply. Kayla walked into the room quietly, her bare feet padding against the cold floor. Her little eyes darted between Chloe and Margaret nervously. "Morning, Kayla," Chloe said gently, patting the chair beside her. "Come sit." Kayla obeyed, sliding into the seat carefully. Chloe put a pancake on her plate. Kayla whispered thank you, before nibbling cautiously. Margaret watched silently, her fork hovering in her hand. And then, the sound of tires crunched outside the driveway. All three of them froze. A car door slammed shut. Heavy footsteps echoed against the gravel. And a new voice called out from outside the door, this time a woman's voice. "Margaret, open this door right now." Chloe's blood ran cold. Kayla dropped her fork, her hands trembling. Margaret's face went pale again. And Chloe realized, whatever truth her mother had been hiding, it wasn't finished yet, because someone else had come for Kayla. And this time it was a woman. The pounding on the front door shook the walls. "Margaret," the woman's voice rang out sharp, furious, commanding. "Open this door before I break it down." Chloe's heart jumped into her throat. She grabbed Kayla's hand under the table and held it tight. Kayla's little fingers trembled. Her eyes filled with tears as she whispered, "Don't let her in." Chloe leaned down. "Who is she?" she whispered quickly. But Kayla only shook her head, her lips pressed shut, her body trembling all over. "Margaret," the woman screamed again, slamming her fist against the door. "You can't hide her forever. You hear me? You can't hide her forever." Chloe spun toward her mother. "Mom, who is that woman?" Margaret stood stiff near the stove, her face pale as paper. Her eyes darted toward the door, then toward Kayla, then finally back to Chloe. "She shouldn't be here," Margaret whispered, her voice shaking. "Not her. Not now." The woman outside banged again, each knock harder than the last. The silver chandelier above the dining table rattled from force. Chloe shot up from her chair. "I'm not just sitting here while strangers show up yelling at our door. I'm going to find out what's going on." She started toward the hallway, but Margaret's hand shot out, gripping her wrist tightly. "Don't open it," Margaret hissed. Her grip was iron, her nails digging into Chloe's skin. "Mom!" Chloe pulled her hand free, furious now. "You keep saying don't open it, but you won't tell me why. I'm not a child anymore. I deserve the truth." Kayla let out a soft cry, curling into herself in the chair as if the shouting around her was too much. The banging stopped. The silence that followed was deafening. Then, slow, deliberate words slipped through the door. "You think you can keep her?" the woman's voice hissed. "You think money will protect you? She doesn't belong to you. She belongs to me." Chloe froze. Her eyes darted toward Kayla. The little girl's hands were pressed over her ears now, tears spilling down her cheeks. Chloe's stomach twisted. "Belongs to me." Those words haunted her. Who was this woman? And why did she think Kayla belonged to her? The woman outside didn't leave right away. She lingered, pacing the gravel driveway. Chloe could hear the crunch of her shoes against the stones back and forth, back and forth. Finally, after several long minutes, the sound of her car door slamming echoed again. The engine roared to life. Tires screeched angrily. And then silence. She was gone, at least for now. Chloe turned back toward her mother. "That's it. No more games. You're telling me the truth. Who is she? And why is she saying Kayla belongs to her?" Margaret's lips trembled. She sank heavily into a chair, her body shaking like she was carrying the weight of the world. "It's not safe to talk here," she whispered. "Not now. Not yet." Chloe slammed her hands on the table, her voice sharp. "Then when, after another stranger shows up at our door, after something happens to Kayla." Kayla whimpered, whispering through her tears, "Please don't let her take me. Please." Chloe's heart broke. She knelt down beside her, wrapping the little girl in her arms. "No one is taking you, Kayla," she whispered. "Not while I'm here. I promise." But deep down, Chloe's chest burned with unease, because promises meant nothing if she didn't understand what they were up against. That afternoon passed in uneasy silence. Margaret barely spoke. She busied herself with small chores, dusting the already spotless mantel, rearranging the silver spoons in their drawer, straightening the perfectly lined-up family portraits on the wall. Chloe watched her carefully, noticing how her hands shook as she worked. This wasn't normal. This wasn't the calm, controlling woman she had grown up with. This was someone unraveling. Kayla stayed close to Chloe, never straying more than a few steps away. She seemed like a shadow clinging to safety, too afraid to breathe freely. By evening, Chloe couldn't take it anymore. "Mom," she said firmly as they sat in the dimly lit living room, "I need answers. Now, who was that woman? Why did she say Kayla belonged to her?" Margaret's eyes flickered toward the window, as if worried the woman might still be listening. Finally, she whispered, "Her name is Denise Carter. She claims to be Kayla's aunt." Chloe's jaw dropped. "Her aunt? Are you serious? Then why is Kayla here locked in our kitchen instead of with family?" Margaret's lips pressed tight. "She's not fit to raise a child," Margaret said sharply. "She's dangerous. She's involved with people who would use Kayla for terrible things. I couldn't let that happen." Chloe blinked, trying to piece it together. "Then why not call the police? Or social services? Why hide Kayla here like some kind of secret prisoner?" Margaret flinched at the word prisoner. "You don't understand," she whispered, her voice breaking. "The system doesn't protect girls like her. They'd send her back to Denise. And then—" Her voice trailed off, tears filling her eyes. Chloe froze. She had never seen her mother cry like this. Not once in her life. "Then what, Mom?" she asked gently. Margaret shook her head, wiping her tears. "You don't want to know." But Chloe did. She wanted to know everything. Because the more she looked at Kayla, the more she realized this little girl was caught in something much bigger, something darker than she could even imagine. Night fell again. The mansion was quiet. Too quiet. Chloe lay awake in her childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint sound of Kayla's soft breathing from the guest room down the hall. But then, a sound, not from inside the house this time. From outside, the crunch of footsteps on gravel. Slow, careful, deliberate. Chloe shot upright in bed, her heart hammering. She rushed to the window, pulling the curtain back just enough to peek through. At first, she saw nothing but shadows. The moonlight glowed faintly over the driveway. Then she saw it, a figure, standing by the gate, watching, not moving, just standing. Chloe's breath caught in her throat. She couldn't see clearly, but she knew it wasn't the same woman from earlier. This figure was taller, broader, a man, and he wasn't leaving. He was just standing there, staring at the mansion. The next morning, Chloe told her mother, "I saw someone last night," she said urgently over breakfast. "By the gate, just watching. He didn't move for a long time." Margaret's face went pale. "We're not safe anymore," she whispered. Her hands trembled as she set down her coffee cup. Chloe frowned. "Mom, what do you mean?" "Who was he?" Margaret looked at her daughter, her voice low and heavy. "If Denise is here, then others won't be far behind. They'll come, and when they do, they'll do whatever it takes to take Kayla back." Chloe swallowed hard. "Others? What others?" Margaret didn't answer, and Chloe realized, with a chill running down her spine, this wasn't just about a family argument. This was about something much bigger, something dangerous, and Kayla was at the very center of it. Later that day, Chloe decided to do what her mother refused to. She took her phone, stepped out onto the back porch where Margaret couldn't hear, and dialed a number. 911, what's your emergency? Chloe hesitated, glancing back at the door. My name is Chloe Harding, she said quickly. I think there's a little girl in danger. She's staying in my mother's house, but there are people trying to take her. I don't know who to trust anymore. Please, someone needs to check this out. The operator's voice was calm. Stay on the line, ma'am. Can you give me the address? Chloe gave it, her hands shaking. Help is on the way, the operator said. Chloe let out a shaky breath, relief flooding her chest. At least now, someone would step in, someone who could protect Kayla. But just as she ended the call and slipped her phone back into her pocket, the sound of crunching gravel reached her ears again. Her blood ran cold. She turned slowly toward the gate and froze, because this time there wasn't just one figure standing there. There were three. Chloe froze on the porch, her body stiff as stone. Three figures stood at the gate. They weren't moving. They weren't shouting. They weren't trying to force their way in. They were just standing there, watching. The morning sun threw long shadows across the driveway, making them look even taller, even darker. Chloe's breath caught in her throat. Her heart pounded so loudly she could hear it in her ears. She backed slowly toward the door, careful not to make a sound. But before she could step inside, one of the figures lifted a hand. He waved. The motion was slow, deliberate, unsettling. Chloe's stomach twisted. This wasn't a friendly wave. It was a kind of wave that said, I see you. I know you're there. And I'm not leaving. Her hand fumbled against the door handle. She yanked it open and stumbled inside, slamming it shut behind her. Mom! She cried, her voice shaking. Margaret appeared almost instantly from the living room, her face pale, her eyes wide with fear. What happened? They're back, Chloe gasped. Three of them. At the gate, just standing there. Margaret's breath hitched. She rushed toward the window, pulling the curtain back just an inch. She peeked out, then let the curtain fall, her hands trembling. It's starting, she whispered. Chloe grabbed her arm. What's starting? Mom, you need to stop talking in riddles and tell me the truth. Who are they? What do they want with Kayla? Margaret shook her head violently, her gray hair falling from its pins. You don't understand, Chloe. If they get inside, we're all in danger. Not just Kayla, all of us. Then call the police. Chloe shouted. I already called. They're on their way. That's what we need. Help. Margaret froze. Her eyes snapped toward Chloe. You did what? Chloe blinked. I called 911. I had to. You're not telling me anything, and strangers keep showing up at our house. What was I supposed to do? Margaret's face went white as snow. She gripped the back of the chair so hard her knuckles turned bone white. You shouldn't have done that, she whispered. Chloe's chest tightened. Why not? Margaret's lips trembled. Because the police, they can't be trusted in this. If they come, it will only get worse. Before Chloe could respond, a small voice piped up from the staircase. Are they here? Both women turned. Kayla stood halfway down the stairs, clutching the railing with her tiny hands, her eyes wide and fearful. She wore the oversized t-shirt Chloe had given her the night before, her hair still messy from sleep. Yes, sweetheart, Chloe said softly, walking to her. But don't worry. I won't let them hurt you. Kayla's lip quivered. They'll try to take me. Chloe crouched, smoothing her tangled hair. Not while I'm here. Do you hear me? Not while I'm here. But inside, Chloe's chest burned with questions. Who were these people? Why did they want Kayla? And why was her mother acting like the police, of all people, were the enemy? Minutes ticked by like hours. The figures stayed at the gate. They didn't approach the house. They didn't shout. They didn't leave. When the wail of sirens finally cut through the quiet morning air, Chloe's chest filled with relief. They're here, she whispered. Margaret, on the other hand, stiffened like someone had just thrown a bucket of ice water over her. Two police cars pulled into the long driveway, their lights flashing red and blue against the white walls of the mansion. The three figures at the gate melted into the woods like shadows disappearing in the light. Chloe exhaled shakily. Finally, safety. But when the officer stepped out, Margaret didn't move to greet them. She didn't look relieved. She looked terrified. Chloe frowned. "Mom, what's wrong?" Margaret's lips parted, but no words came out. "Mrs. Harding?" One officer called, approaching the front door. "This is Officer Daniels with Willow Creek PD. We received a call." Chloe moved to open the door, but Margaret grabbed her wrist again. Her grip was steel, her eyes wild. "Don't let them in," she whispered urgently. Chloe yanked her hand free. "Mom, are you out of your mind? They're the police." And before Margaret could stop her, Chloe swung the door open. Two uniformed officers stood there. Officer Daniels, a tall black man with a steady gaze, and Officer Miller, a younger white officer with sharp blue eyes. "Morning," Daniels said calmly. "We got a call about a child possibly in danger. May we come in?" "Yes," Chloe said quickly. "Please. Thank you." Margaret made a strangled noise behind her, but the officers were already stepping inside. Their eyes scanned the grand hallway. The shining chandelier, the golden-framed family portraits. Daniel's gaze softened as it landed on Kayla, who was peeking timidly from behind Chloe. "Hey there," Daniel said gently, crouching slightly. "What's your name, sweetheart?" Kayla clutched Chloe's hand tightly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Kayla." Daniels nodded. "Hi, Kayla. I'm here to make sure you're safe. That's all." "Okay." Kayla didn't answer. She just buried her face against Chloe's side. Chloe rubbed her back reassuringly. But then Officer Miller spoke, his voice sharp. "Where's her legal guardian?" Chloe stiffened. She glanced at Margaret. "My mother's been taking care of her," Chloe said carefully. "But things aren't what they look like. There are people showing up here, threatening us, saying Kayla belongs to them." Daniel's eyes narrowed slightly. "Who exactly?" Chloe hesitated, then whispered. "A woman named Denise Carter. She came yesterday, said she was Kayla's aunt." Daniels exchanged a look with Miller. Then he straightened. "Mrs. Harding," Daniel said firmly, turning to Margaret. "We need to know exactly how this child can be in your home." Margaret's face tightened. Her hands twisted together in front of her. "I told you," she said softly. "She was at my gate, in the rain, alone. I took her in. I've been protecting her." Miller's eyes narrowed. "By locking her in the kitchen?" Chloe's stomach dropped. "How do you know that?" she asked sharply. Miller's lips curved into a thin smile. "We got a report." "A report from who?" Chloe demanded. But Miller didn't answer. He just kept watching Margaret with sharp, calculating eyes. Daniels cleared his throat. "We'll need to speak to both of you separately. And the child, too." Chloe's chest tightened. She didn't want Kayla pulled away. Not now. Not when strangers kept circling like vultures. Margaret's face crumpled. "No," she said, her voice shaking. "You can't take her. You can't." "Mrs. Harding," Daniel said firmly, "no one's taking her. We just need to talk." But Chloe could see the panic rising in her mother's eyes. Her hands shook violently. She backed away toward the staircase. And then, before anyone could stop her, the front window shattered. Glass exploded inward. A brick crashed onto the marble floor. Kayla screamed. Chloe pulled her into her arms, shielding her from shards. The officer spun around, guns drawn, shouting orders. "Stay down." Daniels barked. Another crash, this time from the back of the house. A second window shattered, and through the gaping hole, a voice shouted, "Give us the girl, Margaret, or next time it won't just be glass." The sound of breaking glass echoed like thunder through the grand hallway. Chloe's arms tightened around Kayla, holding her as close as possible. The child's tiny body shook against her, her sobs muffled in Chloe's shirt. Margaret stood frozen at the foot of the stairs, her face drained of all color. Her lips moved as if in prayer, though no sound came out. Officer Daniels crouched low, scanning the shattered front window. His gun was steady in his hand, his voice sharp and commanding. Stay down, he barked again, his eyes darting toward the tree line outside. Miller, check the rear. Yes, sir. Miller shouted, rushing toward the back of the house. Chloe pressed Kayla's head against her chest, trying to shield her from the sight of jagged glass scattered across the marble floor. Her own heart pounded so hard it hurt. Outside voices rose. Margaret, one man yelled, his voice deep and rough. You can't hide her forever. Another voice, a woman's this time, joined in sharper, angrier. That girl doesn't belong to you. Hand her over before we make this worse. Chloe's stomach turned. They weren't just random strangers. They knew her mother's name. They knew Kayla was inside. She looked to Margaret, desperate for answers. Mom, who are they? Margaret's hands trembled. She didn't answer. She couldn't. Daniels moved closer to the window, his body low. Police, he shouted to the shattered glass. This is Officer Daniels with Willow Creek PD. Back away from the property immediately or you will be arrested. A silence followed, heavy and suffocating. For a moment, Chloe thought maybe the warning had worked. Then came the sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, crunching over gravel. Someone was walking closer. Daniels tightened his grip on his gun. Stay back, he warned. But the figure stepped into view, a tall man in a dark jacket, his face shadowed by a baseball cap. He stopped just beyond a gate, his hands raised casually in mock surrender. We don't want trouble, officer, he called. But the girl doesn't belong here. She has family, she has blood, and we're here to take her back. Chloe's pulse spiked. She held Kayla tighter, feeling the little girl's nails dig into her arm. Daniel's voice was firm. If you have an illegal claim, you take it through the courts. This is not the way. The man chuckled darkly. The courts? He shook his head. The courts don't care about kids like her. We do. Chloe shivered at the way he said kids like her. Margaret finally found her voice, though it cracked with fear. You won't take her, she shouted, her voice trembling. Not while I'm alive. The man tilted his head, amused. Then maybe that's what'll come to. The words hung in the air like poison. Daniels braced himself. Back away now, he warned, his gun never wavering. This is your last chance. For a tense moment, Chloe thought the man might charge the gate. But instead, he smiled, slow and chilling. Then he backed away, step by step, melting into the trees with the others. The silence that followed was somehow worse than the shouting. Daniels exhaled slowly but didn't lower his weapon. He kept his eyes fixed on the woods. They'll be back, he muttered. The house was quiet again, but the air was heavy with fear. Miller returned from the back, his face tense. Same thing out there. Broken glass, but no one inside. They disappeared into the woods. Daniels nodded grimly. They know the property. They're not amateurs. Chloe's throat tightened. So what do we do now? Daniels looked at her, then at Margaret. His voice softened, but his words were clear. We need the truth. All of it. If we don't know who these people are and why they're after Kayla, we can't protect her. Chloe turned to her mother, her frustration bubbling over. Mom, enough secrets. You saw what just happened. You can't hide it anymore. Tell us the truth. Margaret sank into a chair, her hands clutching the armrests. Her eyes were distant, haunted. I didn't lie, she whispered. I found her, alone. But what I didn't tell you, her voice broke. She covered her face with her hands. She wasn't just at the gate. She was running from them. Chloe's breath caught. Them? The same people outside. Margaret nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. They were chasing her that night. She was barefoot. Her clothes were torn. She was crying so hard she couldn't even breathe. I brought her inside. I thought if I locked her in the kitchen, they wouldn't find her. I thought it was the safest place. I never meant to hurt her. Daniel's jaw tightened. He crouched down to Kayla's level again. Sweetheart, is that true? Were you running from those people? Kayla's eyes filled with tears. She nodded slowly, her small voice barely audible. They said, I belong to them. But I don't. I don't. Chloe's chest ached. She hugged her tighter. You don't. You belong where you're safe. Daniels rose to his feet. That's enough for now. We'll make sure patrol cars keep an eye on this property. But if they're this bold in daylight, he trailed off, his expression grim. You'll need more than police protection. You'll need answers. Margaret lowered her head. I know. Hours passed. The broken glass was cleaned up, though the house still felt shattered. Daniels and Miller had left patrol cars at the end of the driveway, but their presence felt small compared to the threat that lingered in the shadows of the trees. Chloe sat with Kayla in the living room, reading her a picture book to calm her. The child's eyes fluttered closed, exhaustion finally overtaking fear. Margaret stood at the window, her arms wrapped around herself. Her gaze was fixed on the woods, as if expecting another attack at any moment. When Chloe finally carried Kayla upstairs and tucked her into bed, she returned to find Margaret still standing there, unmoving. Mom, Chloe said gently, you have to tell me everything. Who are they? Why do they think Kayla belongs to them? Margaret didn't answer right away. She just stared out at the darkening tree line. Finally, she whispered, because of her mother. Chloe blinked. Her mother? You know her? Margaret turned slowly, her eyes filled with sorrow Chloe had never seen before. I knew her very well, and if they find out who Kayla really is, she shuddered, none of us will be safe. Before Chloe could respond, a loud bang echoed through the house. Not from outside, from upstairs. Kayla's room. Chloe's heart stopped. She and Margaret locked eyes. And then came the sound of Kayla's scream. The scream tore through the house like a knife. Chloe didn't think. She ran. Her feet pounded the marble stairs two at a time, her heart racing so fast she felt it might burst from her chest. Behind her, Margaret's voice rose in panic. Chloe, wait. But Chloe didn't wait. She couldn't. Kayla's scream was sharp, raw, filled with terror. She reached the hallway, the shadows stretching long under the dim chandelier. Kayla's bedroom door was wide open, the soft glow of a nightlight spilling into the hall. Kayla! Chloe cried, rushing inside. The room looked exactly as she had left it. The bed neatly tucked, the stuffed bear on the pillow, the curtains drawn tight against the window. But Kayla was not in the bed. Chloe's eyes darted around wildly. Kayla! A muffled sob came from the corner. Chloe turned and froze. Kayla was crouched on the floor by the closet, her tiny body shaking. She had pulled the closet door half closed, hiding behind it. Her wide eyes shone with tears. Chloe dropped to her knees beside her. Sweetheart, what happened? What scared you? Kayla's lips trembled. She pointed a shaky finger toward the window. Chloe followed her gaze. The window was locked. The curtains were still drawn. Nothing seemed out of place. But on the glass, barely visible in the nightlight glow, was a handprint. A large, smudged handprint. On the inside, Chloe's breath caught. Her stomach flipped. That handprint hadn't been there before. She was sure of it. Margaret rushed into the room, her face pale, her breath ragged. What happened? Chloe pointed with a trembling finger. The window. Margaret's eyes followed, and when she saw the handprint, her knees nearly buckled. She gripped the doorframe for balance. No, she whispered. Not again. Chloe turned to her, panic rising. What do you mean not again? Mom, was someone in this room? Margaret didn't answer. She couldn't seem to find the words. Kayla's sobs grew louder, her little chest heaving. He was here, she cried. He tried to take me. Chloe pulled her close, her own hands trembling. Who, baby? Who was here? Kayla buried her face against Chloe's shoulder, whispering through her tears. The man in the hat. Chloe's blood ran cold. The same man who had stood at the gate, smirking. Somehow, impossibly, he had been inside the house. But how? She glanced around again, her mind racing. No broken locks. No open windows. No sign of forced entry. Yet the handprint was there, and Kayla's terror was real. Margaret finally sank onto the edge of the bed, her face in her hands. I should have known they'd find a way, she whispered. They always find a way. Chloe's patience snapped. Enough, Mom. No more half answers. Who are they? Why are they after Kayla? Tell me the truth, now. Margaret's shoulders shook. When she finally lifted her head, her eyes glistened with tears. "They're not just strangers," she said softly. "They're connected to her mother. And if they've come this far, it means they won't stop until they get what they came for." Chloe frowned, clutching Kayla tighter. "Her mother? You said you only found her at the gate." Margaret's lips pressed into a thin line. She nodded slowly. "I did, but it wasn't the first time I'd seen her." Chloe blinked. "What do you mean?" Margaret's gaze drifted toward the window, her voice distant. "Weeks ago, I saw a young woman walking past the property. She was thin, tired, carrying a little girl by the hand. I remember her eyes, sharp but so sad. That girl was Kayla. She looked hungry, lost. I tried to offer help, but the woman hurried away." Chloe's stomach twisted. "So Kayla was with her mother?" Margaret nodded. "Yes, but when she showed up at the gate that stormy night, Kayla was alone. I don't know what happened to her mother. I only know those people outside want Kayla because of her." The room went quiet, heavy with the weight of Margaret's confession. Chloe stroked Kayla's hair gently, whispering, "You're safe here, I promise." But inside, she wasn't sure of anything anymore. The rest of the night was restless. Chloe kept Kayla in her own room, refusing to let her out of sight. She barely slept, her body tense with the fear of another scream, another shadow slipping through the cracks. Margaret didn't sleep either. Chloe could hear her pace in the hallway, her footsteps soft but constant. By morning, the house felt like a cage. Sunlight streamed to the windows, but it didn't warm the chill in the air. Chloe sat at the breakfast table, Kayla beside her, nibbling on toast without appetite. Margaret brewed coffee in silence, her eyes red from lack of sleep. Finally, Chloe broke the silence. "We can't go on like this. We need to know who these people are. We need to know why they want her." Margaret's hands tightened around the coffee pot. "I told you, they're tied to her mother." "That's not enough," Chloe snapped. "What kind of tie? Family? Enemies? What do they want from a child?" Margaret hesitated, her lips parted. But before she could speak, a sharp knock rattled the front door. Chloe jumped. Kayla flinched, dropping her toast. Margaret froze, the coffee pot still in her hand. The knock came again, louder this time. Daniel's voice called through the door. "It's Officer Daniels. May I come in?" Relief washed over Chloe. She stood quickly, pulling Kayla with her. "It's the police." "It's okay." But Margaret didn't move. She stared at the door as if it were a loaded gun pointed at her. Chloe frowned. "Mom, what's wrong?" Margaret set the coffee pot down with shaking hands. "Be careful," she whispered. "Sometimes the danger doesn't come from outside." Chloe stared at her in disbelief. "What are you even saying? He's a police officer." Margaret didn't answer. She just folded her arms across her chest and stood rooted to the floor. Chloe opened the door. Daniel stood there, calm but serious. "Morning," he said, stepping inside. "I wanted to check on you three after last night. Any more disturbances?" Chloe shook her head quickly. "No, but—" Her words caught when she noticed something. Daniels had a scrape along his cheek, a fresh one, as if he'd been in a struggle. Chloe's heart skipped. "What happened to your face?" Daniels touched the mark lightly. "Just a scuffle with a suspect earlier this morning. Nothing to worry about." But Margaret's eyes narrowed. She didn't look convinced. Kayla clung tighter to Chloe's hand, whispering, "It's him. I know it's him." Chloe froze. She crouched down. "Sweetheart, what do you mean? Who is him?" Kayla's eyes filled with tears. She pointed directly at Daniels. "That's the man in the hat." The room went silent. Chloe's breath caught in her throat, her eyes darting between Kayla and Officer Daniels. The little girl's trembling finger was still pointed straight at him. Her voice shook, but her words were clear. "That's the man in the hat." For a split second, nobody moved. Then Daniels blinked, stunned. He looked at Kayla, then at Chloe, his hands slightly raised in disbelief. "Wait, what?" His voice was calm but edged with shock. "You think I'm the man outside?" Kayla's eyes filled with tears. She buried her face in Chloe's side, her small shoulders shaking. Chloe's heart pounded. She wanted to believe Kayla, to trust the fear in her voice. But Daniels had been the one protecting them. He had been the one standing between them and danger. Still, the scrape on his face. The strange silence in his eyes when she asked about it. Margaret stepped forward slowly, her expression hard and unreadable. "Children don't lie about fear," she said coldly. "If she sees something, it means something." Daniels turned toward her, his jaw tightening. "With all due respect, ma'am, fear can make people see things that aren't there. I've been nothing but honest with you. Why would I put myself in danger protecting you if I was the same man threatening you?" Chloe swallowed hard, caught between the two voices pulling at her. She looked down at Kayla, who clung to her desperately. "Sweetheart," Chloe said softly, "are you sure? Sometimes at night, when it's dark, things can look." Kayla shook her head violently. "It's him. I know it's him. He was right there in my room." Her words sent a chill through Chloe's body. Daniels ran a hand over his face, frustration spilling into his voice. "This is crazy. I've got an entire department who can vouch for me. Miller was with me last night. You saw us both." Margaret's sharp eyes narrowed. "We saw uniforms. But uniforms can be borrowed. Badges can be faked." Daniel's face hardened. "Are you accusing me of being part of this?" Margaret didn't flinch. "I'm saying I don't trust anyone. Not anymore." Chloe's chest tightened. "Stop. All of you. This isn't helping." She looked at Daniels, desperate. "If you're innocent, then prove it. Help us understand who these people are. Help us find out why they want Kayla." Daniel's eyes softened. He nodded slowly. "That's exactly what I'm trying to do." But Kayla still wouldn't look at him. She clung tighter to Chloe, her tiny body trembling. The morning dragged on under a cloud of tension. Daniels remained calm, though Chloe could see the weight pressing on him. Margaret hovered like a hawk, never letting him out of her sight. Chloe tried to distract Kayla with coloring books, but every time Daniels moved across the room, the girl stiffened. Her little hand squeezed Chloe's, so tight it hurt. Finally, Daniels broke the silence. "Look, I get it. The kid is scared. But fear can twist memories. Maybe she saw someone who looked like me." He glanced at Margaret. "That man at the gate, hat low, face shadowed. It's possible." Margaret's lips tightened, but she didn't respond. Chloe sighed, exhausted. "So what do we do? Because whoever those people are, they're not going to stop." Daniel's eyes flicked toward Kayla, then back to Chloe. "We need to dig into her background. Find out who her mother is, what ties she had. That's the only way we'll know who we're up against." Margaret flinched at his words. Chloe caught it. "Mom," she asked slowly, "you know more than you've told me, don't you?" Margaret's eyes darted away. Her silence was an answer in itself. Daniels leaned forward, his tone firmer. "Mrs. Harding, if you don't tell us everything, you're putting this child in greater danger." "Who is her mother?" Margaret's hands twisted in her lap. Her voice cracked. "Her name was Lena. Lena Carter." Chloe's eyes widened. "Carter? Like Denise, the woman who came here claiming to be Kayla's aunt?" Margaret nodded slowly. "Yes, Lena was her sister." Daniel's face darkened. "That makes sense. If Denise is claiming guardianship, she may have a legal angle. But if she's showing up with thugs instead of paperwork, then there's more going on." Chloe's mind raced. "So, Lena was Kayla's mom. What happened to her?" Margaret's lips pressed into a thin line. She whispered, "She's gone." Chloe froze. "Gone? What do you mean?" Margaret shook her head, tears brimming. "She disappeared weeks ago. And I think those people know what happened." The room fell silent. Kayla looked up, her little voice breaking. "She's not coming back, is she?" Chloe hugged her tightly, heart aching. She didn't have an answer. Daniels cleared his throat. If Lena disappeared, then Kayla may be the key to whatever happened. That's why they want her. She knows something, even if she doesn't realize it. Chloe's stomach churned. The idea of Kayla being targeted because of what she might know made her sick. Margaret buried her face in her hands. "I should have kept her hidden. I should have." Before she could finish, a sharp crash rattled the house. All three adults jumped. Kayla shrieked, clinging to Chloe. This time it wasn't glass. It was the front door. Daniels was on his feet instantly, gun drawn. "Stay back," he ordered. The pounding continued, louder, harder. Someone was trying to break in. Margaret's face went ashen. "It's them." But then a voice shouted through the wood. "Open up. This is CPS, Child Protective Services. Step aside immediately." Chloe froze. Her heart skipped. "CPS?" Daniels lowered his weapon slowly, his eyes narrowing. "That complicates things." Margaret shook her head violently. No, you can't let them in. If they take Kayla, she's gone forever." Chloe's pulse thundered in her ears. On the other side of the door, the pounding grew louder. "Last warning. Open the door or we'll come in by force." Kayla buried her face against Chloe's chest, sobbing. "Don't let them take me." Chloe looked at the door, looked at Daniels, looked at her mother, and realized she had no idea who was telling the truth anymore. The pounding on the front door did not stop. Each strike rattled the frame, sharp and heavy, vibrating through the floorboards. "Child Protective Services. Open the door immediately." The voice outside demanded again, firmer this time. Chloe stood frozen in the living room, Kayla clinging to her side, her small hands gripping so tightly that Chloe's arm tingled. Margaret's face was pale, her eyes darting between the door and Officer Daniels. Daniels kept his weapon lowered but ready. He stepped toward the window, pulling the curtain back just enough to get a glimpse outside. Two figures stood at the porch. They were dressed in dark suits, one holding a clipboard, the other with a badge clipped to his chest. A marked white SUV with the letters CPS stenciled on the side was parked at the curb. Daniels frowned. They looked legitimate. Margaret shook her head sharply. Badges can be forged. Vehicles can be stolen. They're not here to help. They're here to take her. Chloe's mind raced. She had heard stories before about people impersonating authorities to get inside houses. But the car, the uniforms, everything looked real. The pounding stopped. Silence pressed down on the house for a moment. Then the voice outside called again. "This is your last chance. Step aside, or we will make entry under Emergency Child Protection Authority." Kayla whimpered softly, burying her face against Chloe's side. "Don't let them take me," she whispered. Chloe's throat tightened. She wanted to promise that she wouldn't, but she didn't know if she could keep that promise. Daniels turned back to the room. "Listen to me carefully. If they're real CPS, they can't just take her without paperwork. They'd need a court order, unless they can prove immediate danger. We can stall." Margaret's voice rose sharply. "Stall? You'll hand her over if they press hard enough. That's what you're planning." Daniel's jaw tightened. "I'm planning to figure out who's real and who's lying. If these people are imposters, we need to catch them in the act. If they're not..." Chloe cut in quickly. "If they're not, what happens to Kayla?" Daniels met her eyes. "Then the law takes over. And that means she won't stay here." The words landed like heavy stones in Chloe's stomach. Another crash thundered against the door, this time heavier. They were using something to force it open. Margaret's voice cracked. "They're not stopping. What do we do?" Daniels raised his voice, calling out through the door. "Hold it. Identify yourselves properly. Slide your ID under the door." There was a pause. Then a voice shouted back. "We don't have time for games. This is a matter of child safety. Step aside now." Chloe's pulse quickened. That didn't sound right. If they were legitimate, why wouldn't they just show identification? Daniels motioned for Chloe and Margaret to back away from the door. "Get the kid out of sight. Now." Chloe grabbed Kayla and pulled her toward the hallway. Margaret followed close behind, muttering under her breath about deception and traps. The pounding grew louder. Splinters cracked at the edges of the doorframe. Then, just as suddenly as it started, the noise stopped. Silence. Chloe's breathing felt loud in the stillness. She held Kayla tighter, waiting. Daniel stayed near the door, gun raised, listening. Then a faint noise drifted in through the window. Car door slamming. An engine starting. Tires screeching as the SUV pulled away from the curb. Daniels exhaled slowly, lowering his weapon. They're gone. Chloe blinked. They just left. He nodded. Yeah, but that tells me they weren't real. Real CPS doesn't back off that easily. They would have waited for police backup. Margaret's voice was low and sharp. I told you, they're not who they claim to be. They want her, and they'll keep coming until they get her. Chloe rubbed Kayla's back gently, her thoughts spinning. If those people were fake, then this was bigger than she realized. They had resources, vehicles, uniforms, and the nerve to impersonate government officials. She looked at Daniels. So what now? They're going to try again. He nodded grimly. They will, but we're not going to sit here waiting. We need to take the fight to them. Margaret snapped her head toward him. No, absolutely not. That's exactly what they want. If we step out, we're exposed. Daniels shook his head. If we stay here, we're trapped. They can surround the house, cut power, cut phones, whatever they want. Out there, we at least have options. Chloe hesitated. But where will we even go? Daniels glanced at Kayla, then back at Chloe. Her mother, Lena, if she's missing, then finding out what happened to her is the key. Somebody knows where she went, and somebody doesn't want us to find out. We track her trail, we find answers. Margaret stiffened, her eyes dark. You don't understand what you're walking into. Lena wasn't just some woman. She was involved with people, dangerous people. Chloe's heart skipped. What kind of people? Margaret shook her head slowly. People who operate in shadows. People who don't like their secrets exposed. If they're after Kayla now, it's because Lena stumbled onto something she wasn't supposed to. Daniel's expression hardened. Then we need to know what that something is. Otherwise, Kayla's not safe anywhere. The conversation ended abruptly when a sound cut through the air, soft at first, then louder, a phone buzzing on the table. Margaret froze. Chloe turned toward the sound. It was Daniel's phone. He glanced at the screen, frowning. It's Miller. He answered quickly, putting the call on speaker. Miller, talk. The voice on the other end was hurried, almost breathless. Daniels, you need to get out of there. Now. Chloe's eyes widened. What's going on? Miller continued, his tone sharp. The station's compromised. Files are gone. Lena Carter's case, wiped clean. And somebody knows you've been looking into it. They're coming for you. The line went dead. Silence gripped the room again. Daniel slipped the phone back into his pocket, his jaw tight. We don't have time. Margaret's voice trembled. You see? They're already one step ahead. Every move we make, they're watching. Chloe's stomach twisted. So what do we do? Daniel's eyes flicked toward the back door. We run. We take Kayla, and we run before they get here. Margaret's face contorted with fear. If we run, they'll find us faster. We need to stay hidden. Daniel shook his head. If we stay, they'll trap us. If we move, at least we choose ground. Kayla tugged at Chloe's sleeve, her voice barely a whisper. Please don't let them take me. Chloe hugged her tighter. I won't. I promise. But even as she said the words, she wasn't sure she believed them. Daniels moved quickly, checking the windows, scanning the street. We've got maybe 10 minutes before they regroup. Pack what you can. Only essentials. Margaret stared at him, her eyes blazing with distrust. And then what? You hand her over the moment someone flashes a badge. Daniel shot her a sharp look. You can doubt me all you want, but I'm the only chance you've got right now. Chloe pulled Kayla toward the stairs. Come on, we'll grab some clothes, a few things she needs. Margaret didn't move at first. Then, with a heavy sigh, she followed. Upstairs, Chloe threw clothes into a bag as quickly as she could. Kayla sat on the bed, watching silently, her small face pale and drawn. Margaret stood by the door, her arms crossed tightly. This is madness. We're walking into a trap. Chloe glanced at her. And what's your plan? Hide in this house forever? You said yourself they won't stop. Margaret's jaw clenched, but she said nothing. Within minutes, Chloe zipped the bag shut. She reached for Kayla's hand. Ready? Kayla nodded weakly. They headed back downstairs. Daniels was already at the door, scanning the street outside. He motioned sharply. Move. Now. The group slipped out the back, cutting across the yard toward a side street. For a moment, the neighborhood was eerily quiet. Then a sound split the stillness, an engine roaring to life nearby. Headlights flashed. A black van pulled out from around the corner, speeding straight toward them. Daniels yanked his gun free, shouting, "Get down!" Chloe pulled Kayla close, shielding her. Margaret froze in place, eyes wide. The van skidded to a stop just yards away. The side door slid open, and inside, a familiar face stared out at them. Denise Carter, Kayla's supposed aunt. She leaned forward, her voice cold and sharp. "Hand her over. Now." The night air was sharp and heavy, filled with the faint scent of gasoline from the black van that now blocked the narrow street. Its headlights blazed directly into their faces, making Chloe squint as she held Kayla close. Denise Carter leaned out from the van, her figure illuminated in the harsh white light. Her expression was set in stone, her eyes cold and calculating. "Hand her over," Denise repeated, her voice low but steady. Kayla whimpered and buried her face into Chloe's chest, clutching at her shirt with trembling hands. Chloe's pulse thundered in her ears. Daniels raised his weapon, aiming it directly at the open door. His voice was sharp and commanding. "Step out of the vehicle. Slowly. Hand where I can see them." Denise didn't flinch. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, as if amused by his attempt to control. "You don't want to point that at me, officer," she said smoothly. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." Margaret's breath caught. "Don't listen to her. She's lying. She's always lying." Denise's gaze flicked toward the old woman. A faint smile curved across her lips. "Ah, Margaret, still playing the part of protector. I see. You've done well to keep her hidden this long, but your time is up." Chloe's heart pounded. "What do you mean, time is up? Why are you after her?" Denise's eyes narrowed. "That's not for you to question. All you need to know is that Kayla doesn't belong with you. She belongs with me." Kayla's grip tightened around Chloe's waist. Her small voice barely carried over the sound of the idling engine. "I don't want to go." Daniel's finger hovered near the trigger. "If she doesn't want to go, then she stays right here. You're not taking her anywhere until I see court orders, DNA tests, and a whole lot of legal paperwork. Step out now." Denise sighed, as though tired of the entire exchange. Slowly, she lifted one hand, then the other, and stepped down from the van. She was tall, her coat hanging heavy over her frame, her boots clicking against the pavement. But she didn't look like someone running a rescue mission. She looked like someone running an operation. Margaret's voice trembled. "She's not family. She's part of the reason Lena disappeared. Don't let her fool you." Denise's expression hardened. "Careful, Margaret. You know more than you should. And you know what happens to people who talk too much." The tension stretched tight, every second dragging like a blade against the skin. Daniels gestured sharply with his gun. "Move away from the vehicle. Hands where I can see them. Now." Denise raised her hands higher, stepping back slowly. Her eyes, however, never left Kayla. Chloe shifted uneasily, glancing between Margaret and Denise. The pieces weren't fitting together. Both women spoke with certainty. Both claimed to know the truth, but only one could be telling it. Kayla's small voice cut through the night again. "Please don't let her take me." Daniel spoke quickly, his tone tight. "We're leaving. Now, move toward the alley." They began edging backward, Chloe clutching Kayla tightly, Margaret trailing close behind. Denise's lips curled into a thin smile. "You think you can run from this? You don't even know what game you're playing." Daniels ignored her, keeping his gun trained as they backed into the shadows of a narrow alley. But then, a sharp whistle pierced the air. From the opposite end of the alley, figures emerged. 3 men, dressed in dark clothing, their faces obscured by baseball caps pulled low. Each one carried something metallic, pipes, bats, and one with what looked like a crowbar. Chloe's chest tightened. They were trapped. Daniel shifted, raising his weapon toward the new threat. His voice barked out, steady but urgent. Stay back. The men didn't stop. Their steps echoed against concrete as they advanced. Denise laughed softly from behind them. You see? I told you. Running won't save you. The net is already closed. Margaret's voice shook. You led them here. You brought them right to us. Denise tilted her head. I didn't have to. They already knew. Chloe's stomach churned. Whoever these people were, they had been waiting, watching. Daniel's eyes darted between the van behind them and the men closing in from ahead. He muttered under his breath, This is bad. Real bad. Chloe whispered, clutching Kayla tighter. What do we do? Daniels took a steadying breath. We break the trap. We hit hard, we move fast, and we don't stop. Margaret shook her head violently. You'll get us all killed. But before Daniels could answer, one of the men at the front of the group raised his pipe and shouted, Hand over the kid, and nobody gets hurt. Kayla whimpered and buried her face again. Denise's voice rose behind them. You heard him. Do it now and this ends clean. Keep fighting and you'll regret it. Daniel's grip tightened on his weapon. His voice was firm, sharp, unshaking. Nobody touches her. The men surged forward. Daniels fired once into the air, the crack of the shot exploding through the alley, echoing against the walls. The men froze, startled, their steps faltering. For a moment, the air stilled again. But only for a moment. From the rooftop above, a new voice cut in, calm and clear. Drop your weapon, Officer Daniels. You're surrounded. Chloe jerked her head upward. A shadow stood against the dim light of the night sky, a tall figure holding what looked like a rifle trained directly on them. Daniels didn't lower his weapon. Identify yourself. The voice came back, steady and confident. Federal Task Force. You're interfering in an active operation. Lower your gun and hand over the girl. Margaret gasped sharply. No, this isn't federal. It's another trick. Denise smirked, her eyes glinting. Or maybe it's exactly what it looks like. Chloe's pulse roared in her ears. She clutched Kayla tighter, her mind spinning. If this was real, if federal agents were truly involved, then everything was deeper than she could ever imagine. But if it was another trick, then they were standing on the edge of something deadly. The man on the roof steadied his rifle, his voice cutting the night. This is your last warning. Hand over the girl, or you'll all go down. The rifle's barrel glinted faintly under the streetlight as the man on the rooftop steadied his aim. His voice rang out, clear and sharp. This is your final chance. Surrender the child, and nobody gets hurt. The alley seemed to shrink around them. Chloe tightened her grip on Kayla, feeling the girl's small body tremble against her chest. Margaret pressed close, whispering frantic prayers under her breath. Daniels didn't move. His gun stayed raised, shifting between the group of men at the far end of the alley and the shadow on the roof. Federal Task Force, Daniels shouted back. If you're real, prove it. Badge, ID, authorization. Otherwise, you're just another liar. The rooftop figure chuckled, the sound unsettling in its calmness. You don't dictate terms here, officer. You're outnumbered, outgunned, and out of time. Put your weapon down before I decide for you. Denise stood near the van, her hands raised but her expression smug. I told you, this is bigger than you can handle. Do the smart thing and step aside. Margaret's voice cut in, sharp and desperate. Don't listen to her. They're not who they say they are. They've been after Kayla from the beginning. They won't stop. The men in dark clothing tightened their grip on their weapons, shifting closer inch by inch. The sound of boots scraping against asphalt echoed like a drumbeat in Chloe's ears. Daniels breathed heavily, sweat trickling down his temple. He muttered under his breath just loud enough for Chloe to hear. If I dropped this gun, we're finished. Chloe whispered back. Then what do we do? His jaw clenched. We stall, and we wait for an opening. Kayla whimpered softly. I don't want to go. Her small voice pierced a heavy silence, drawing every set of eyes toward her. Denise took a step forward, her tone dripping with control. Sweetheart, you'll be safe with me. I'll take care of you. These people, she gestured at Chloe, Margaret, and Daniels, they can't protect you, not for what's coming. Kayla shook her head violently, burying her face deeper into Chloe's shoulder. Margaret hissed under her breath, glaring at Denise. Liar. You've always been a liar. Just like your brother. The rooftop figure snapped impatiently. Enough. Hand over the girl. Now. Daniels called back sharply. If you're really federal, you know procedure. No agent risks a child's life like this. You fire that rifle, and you blow your cover. So tell me, who are you really working for? A long pause followed, the kind of silence that weighed heavier than words. Then the rooftop man laughed again. Not the laugh of an agent. The laugh of someone who knew he held all the power. You ask too many questions, officer. Questions that will bury you if you keep pressing. Chloe's chest tightened. Whoever this was, he wasn't here to protect anyone. The group of men in the alley shifted again, now only a few feet away. Their shadows stretched long in the harsh glow of the headlights. Daniels raised his gun higher, his voice steel. Nobody takes a step closer. But then, without warning, the rooftop man fired. The shot cracked through the night like thunder, ricocheting against the brick walls. Chloe screamed and dropped to the ground, pulling Kayla with her. Margaret stumbled backward, clutching her chest in terror. Daniels jerked sideways, the bullet narrowly missing his shoulder and shattering a streetlight instead. Glass rained down, plunging the alley into partial darkness. The men surged forward at the sound of the shot, their confidence renewed. Daniels fired back, hitting the ground near their feet. Stay back, he roared. Chloe's ears rang from the gunfire. Kayla sobbed, clinging desperately. Margaret dragged them both closer against the wall, her face pale. The rooftop man spoke again, his voice sharper now. Last warning. Next shot won't miss. Daniels kept his gun trained, his body tense like a coiled spring. His eyes darted between the rooftop and the men. They were boxed in, with nowhere left to run. For a moment, Chloe thought it was over. But then, headlights appeared at the far end of the alley. Another vehicle. It screeched to a halt, its engine growling. A door flew open, and a tall man stepped out, his silhouette backlit by the glare. His voice carried over the chaos, deep and commanding. Everybody freeze. Chloe squinted against the lights. She couldn't see his face clearly, but his tone was firm, steady, different from the rooftop figure's mocking confidence. The men with pipes hesitated, glancing uncertainly toward the newcomer. Even Denise stiffened, her smug expression faltering. The rooftop man's voice barked sharply. Stay focused. Ignore him. But the tall man raised something in his hand, a badge that gleamed under the headlights. His voice boomed louder. Federal Bureau of Investigation. Drop your weapons and stand down. Chloe's breath caught. Real or not, the name hit like a hammer. Daniel's eyes narrowed, suspicion flickering across his face. If you're FBI, then prove it. Right now. The man took a slow step forward, his badge still raised. Special Agent Lucas Grant. And if you don't listen, people are going to die tonight. The alley went still again. The rooftop sniper didn't fire. The men in dark clothing shifted uneasily. Denise's eyes darted back and forth, her expression caught between defiance and calculation. Chloe's heart pounded. Was this the truth finally stepping into the light? Or was it just another layer of deception in a game none of them understood? Agent Grant's voice cut through the tension. You have 5 seconds. Put the gun down, Officer Daniels. Trust me, or she's gone forever. Daniels' finger trembled on the trigger. He glanced at Chloe, then at Margaret, then at Kayla's terrified face. 3 seconds, Grant warned. Chloe's stomach twisted. Every muscle in her body screamed at her to do something, but she had no idea what. Margaret whispered fiercely, Don't trust him. Don't trust any of them. The rooftop figure barked again. Time's up. Hand over the child. And then, without waiting, he fired a second shot. This time, the bullet struck wood, splintering the post just inches from Kayla's head. Chloe screamed, shielding the girl with her body. Daniel spun, firing upward at the roof in rapid succession. Sparks burst from the brick wall as bullets struck. The rooftop figure ducked back, disappearing into the shadows. The men in the alley rushed forward at once, swinging their weapons. Agent Grant drew his gun and fired into the air, his voice booming. "Federal agents, drop it." But the attackers didn't stop. They charged, and in that split second, Chloe realized the truth. There would be no peaceful ending, no compromise. It was fight or be taken. The air inside Grandma Eleanor's house grew heavier with every passing second. No one dared to speak after Harper's outburst, not even Grandma herself. The little girl in the kitchen, whose soft whimpers had broken to the heated silence, remained unseen, yet the sound of her crying rang louder than any words. "Mom," Harper repeated, her voice trembling now. "Who locked that little black girl in the kitchen?" It was a question that ripped through the room like a blade. Eleanor stood rigid, her pale hands clutching the edge of the worn oak table, her knuckles showing white. Her face, normally calm and composed, looked strained, as if she were fighting an invisible weight pressing down on her chest. She finally exhaled, the sound long and tired, but still she said nothing. The silence was unbearable. It was not the kind of silence that settles gently. It was thick, sharp, suffocating. Harper's brothers and cousins, usually noisy and restless, were motionless, their eyes darting between the kitchen door and their grandmother's lined face. "Grandma," whispered Nathaniel, Harper's younger cousin. His tone carried more fear than curiosity. "Why is she crying?" At last, Eleanor moved. Slowly, stiffly, she took a single step toward the kitchen door, her slippers dragging on the wooden floor. The sound echoed in the stillness. Everyone leaned forward, but then, halfway there, she stopped. Her back hunched, her head dipped, as though the weight of decades bore down on her shoulders. "Not yet," she muttered under her breath. The family exchanged confused glances. Not yet? What could that possibly mean? Harper's frustration boiled over. She rose from her chair, pushing it back so sharply it scraped against the floor. She marched toward the door, her chest heaving. "No, Grandma, this isn't right. Whoever's in there, she's just a child." But before Harper's fingers touched the handle, Eleanor's hand shot out with surprising speed and strength, gripping her wrist tightly. Her frail-looking grandmother, whose hands usually trembled when lifting a teacup, now held Harper with iron resolve. "Don't open that door," Eleanor said in a voice so sharp, so commanding, that Harper froze. Gasps rippled through the room. The woman who had once been their gentle, storytelling grandmother now seemed almost unrecognizable. "Why not?" Harper demanded, tears brimming in her eyes. "She's locked in there. Grandma, that's cruel." Eleanor's grip loosened. She let Harper's wrist go, but her gaze remained firm. "Because," Eleanor said softly, "you are not ready to hear the truth yet." Those words sent a shiver through every person in the room. "What truth?" Harper's brother, Mitchell, blurted out. "What are you hiding from us?" Eleanor did not answer. Instead, she walked slowly back to her chair and sat down heavily, her breath shallow. Her silence was louder than any confession. The girls' cries continued, faint but steady, behind the kitchen door. Each sound was like a hammer, striking the fragile glass of the family's peace. Harper pressed her palms to her temples. She could feel her heart thudding in her throat. This wasn't just about a child being shut away. This was something deeper, darker, and she could sense it. The atmosphere remained tense for the rest of the evening. Plates of untouched food sat on the table. Conversation became fragmented, everyone speaking in whispers, unsure what questions to ask and which silences to respect. Even the younger children, usually oblivious to the weight of adult matters, were subdued, their eyes wide with unease. When night finally settled, Harper lay awake in the guest bedroom, staring at the ceiling. The faint creak of the old house kept her restless. She couldn't shake the image of the locked kitchen door. She kept hearing that little girl's muffled sobs in her mind, over and over, until it became unbearable. At midnight, she slipped quietly out of bed. Her bare feet padded along the hallway. She moved carefully, trying not to wake anyone. The floorboards groaned softly beneath her weight, betraying her movements like a tattletale. But she pressed on. The kitchen door loomed ahead of her in the dim moonlight. Her heart pounded as she reached for the handle. This time, she told herself, no one would stop her. But just as her fingers curled around the cold metal, she froze. A shadow moved across the room behind her. Harper, came a low, trembling voice. She spun around, her breath caught in her throat. It was her grandmother. Eleanor stood in the hallway, her frame thin and fragile against the light, but her eyes glistened with something Harper had never seen before. Deep sorrow, maybe even fear. Don't, Eleanor said again, shaking her head slowly. You don't understand. Then explain it to me, Harper pleaded, her whisper harsh and desperate. Please, Grandma. Who is she? Why is she in there? But Eleanor only closed her eyes. She didn't move, didn't speak again. It was as if she were frozen in her own regrets. Harper's hand lingered on the doorknob, trembling, torn between defiance and obedience. And then, from behind the kitchen door, came a sound none of them expected. It wasn't crying this time. It was singing. A soft, wavering voice, young and sweet, began humming a tune. The melody was haunting yet innocent, like something sung to dolls during play. Harper's blood ran cold. Why would a child sing like that while locked away in the dark? The sound grew clearer, and for the first time, the words of the song emerged. They weren't words Harper recognized. Strange, old phrases that felt heavy with history. Eleanor's face drained of color. She clutched her chest as though the melody pierced her heart. No, Eleanor whispered hoarsely. Not that song. Not again. Her frail body trembled, and she collapsed against the wall, sliding down to the floor. Grandma! Harper cried, rushing toward her. But even as she helped her grandmother sit upright, Harper couldn't tear her eyes from the locked kitchen door. The song continued, soft, eerie, relentless. It was no longer just the sound of a trapped child. It was something else, something far more unsettling. The family, startled by Eleanor's collapse, came running from their rooms, filling the hallway with gasps and shouts. Confusion erupted. Someone called for water. Another shouted for an ambulance. Children clung to their parents, terrified, but Harper couldn't hear them. Her entire focus was fixed on the door and the voice behind it. The haunting song had reached its final note, and then silence fell once more. The kitchen door, once still and unmoving, rattled violently. Someone or something was pushing from the other side. The entire family froze as the door shook again, harder this time. The sound of the lock straining, under pressure, filled the house. Stay back! Eleanor rasped, her voice ragged yet forceful. Stay away from that door. But no one moved. They stood rooted in fear, their eyes wide, waiting. And then the lock clicked. Slowly, the kitchen door began to creak open. The kitchen door inched open, its rusty hinges shrieking into the silence of the night. Everyone in the hallway stiffened, eyes wide, hearts pounding like drums. The children clutched their parents' arms, while the adults exchanged frantic, fearful glances. The gap widened slowly, revealing nothing at first but darkness inside. The smell of dust and something faintly metallic drifted out. Harper's throat tightened. She couldn't look away. Then, from the shadows, small fingers curled around the edge of the door. Thin, delicate fingers, belonging unmistakably to a child. Dear God, whispered Mitchell, Harper's brother. The door creaked further, and there she was. A little girl stepped into the dim light of the hallway. Her skin was a soft brown, her hair tied into uneven braids that looked hastily done. She wore a faded yellow dress, far too big for a frame, as though it had been handed down from someone else. Her eyes, large, dark, and filled with something between fear and determination, swept across the stunned faces staring back at her. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. She only stood there, silent, as if testing whether she was safe. The entire family froze, no one daring to move closer, except Harper, her heart pounding. Harper slowly crouched down to the girl's eye level. She softened her tone, whispering, "Hide there, it's okay. You're safe now." The girl tilted her head slightly, her lips parting, but no sound came out. Instead, she clutched a ragged teddy bear to her chest, a bear missing an ear, with stitches barely holding it together. "Grandma," Harper said, not taking her eyes off the child. "Who is she?" All heads turned to Eleanor. The old woman sat slumped against the wall, still clutching her chest, her breathing labored. But her eyes never left the girl. Tears streamed silently down her wrinkled face, carving paths of guilt and grief. She wasn't supposed to come out," Eleanor whispered hoarsely. Her words sent a ripple of shock through the family. "Wasn't supposed to come out?" snapped Harper's cousin, Rebecca. "What does that even mean?" "She's a little girl, not some secret you can just hide away." The little girl flinched at Rebecca's raised voice, shrinking back toward the kitchen. "No, no," Harper said quickly, reaching out her hand gently. "It's okay. Don't be afraid. No one's going to hurt you." The child hesitated, then slowly shuffled closer to Harper. Her tiny hand, trembling but brave, slipped into Harper's open palm. Harper felt the coldness of her skin, the fragility of her bones. She swallowed hard, forcing down the lump in her throat. "She's real," Harper whispered to herself. "She's really real." The hallway filled with murmurs. Some of the family members whispered in disbelief. Others muttered questions Eleanor still refused to answer. The tension was suffocating. Finally, Harper stood, holding the girl's hand firmly in hers. "Grandma, no more secrets. Tell us, who is this child? Why was she locked in your kitchen?" Eleanor closed her eyes, her lips quivering. For a long moment, it seemed she wouldn't respond. Then she spoke, her voice barely more than a breath. "Her name is Lila." The name hung in the air, fragile and haunting. "She's your blood," Eleanor continued, her eyes flicking to Harper, then to Mitchell, then to the others. "She belongs to this family." Gasps echoed through the hallway. "What?" Mitchell choked out. "What do you mean, belongs to this family?" Eleanor's frail hands trembled as she pressed them together in her lap. "Because she is one of you. And I am the reason she has been hidden all this time." The hallway erupted with questions. Voices overlapped, angry, confused, desperate. But Harper stood frozen, her mind reeling. "One of us?" she whispered, staring down at Lila. "How?" Eleanor raised her head slowly, her eyes bloodshot and weary. "Because," she said, her voice cracking, "she is your cousin, the child of someone this family was never allowed to speak of." The room went still again, as though the house itself held its breath. "Whose child?" Rebecca demanded. Eleanor's gaze drifted to a faded family portrait hanging on the wall. It showed her children, Harper's mother and her siblings, when they were young. Her eyes lingered on the image of her late son, Daniel, who had died decades ago under circumstances the family never fully discussed. "Daniel," Eleanor whispered. Harper's breath caught. "Uncle Daniel?" The revelation cracked the air like lightning. The whispers rose again, louder this time, disbelief and shock mixing into chaos. "Daniel's been gone for over 20 years. Mitchell exclaimed. "How could this child be his?" Eleanor's voice trembled as she spoke. "Before he died, Daniel loved a woman. A good woman. But she was poor and she was black. Back then, I didn't approve. I thought it would shame this family. So I forced him to end it. I kept him away from her." Her eyes welled with tears, her body shaking. "But after Daniel passed, she came to me, pregnant, alone, begging for help. And what did I do?" Her voice cracked into a sob. "I turned her away. I told her she and her child would never be welcome here." The family gasped, horrified. Eleanor's frail hands covered her face. "I thought I was protecting us. But I was blind. I was cruel." Years later, when the mother passed away, I found out Lila existed, with no one left to care for her. And instead of doing right by her, instead of welcoming her openly, I brought her here and hid her away. Her words were followed by silence. The weight of her confession pressed on every soul in the room. Harper stared down at Lila, her throat aching. She couldn't believe it. This sweet, fragile girl was family, her cousin, and Grandma had locked her in a kitchen as if she were a secret to be hidden, not a child to be loved. Lila looked up at Harper then, her big eyes searching. For what? Acceptance? Safety? Love? Harper knelt down again, hugging the girl tightly. I'm so sorry, Lila, she whispered fiercely. You'll never be hidden again, not while I'm here. The family watched, guilt and shame settling heavily among them. Some cried quietly. Others looked at Eleanor with anger, even disgust. But Harper's words broke through the suffocating air. We can't change what's been done, she said firmly, her voice shaken with both sorrow and determination. But we can decide what happens now. Lila is family. She deserves love, not secrets. Lila clung tighter to Harper, burying her face against her cousin's shoulder. Eleanor sobbed softly from where she sat on the floor. I don't deserve forgiveness. I don't deserve any of it. Harper looked at her grandmother, her voice gentler now. Maybe not, but you can still do one right thing. You can let her live free. You can let her be part of us. The words hung in the air like a verdict. The family shifted uneasily, each grappled with the truth and what it meant for their lives. Rebecca finally spoke, her tone softer than before. Harper's right. We can't bury this anymore. Lila deserves a home. She deserves all of us. One by one, others nodded. Some hesitated, but slowly the tide turned. Eleanor looked up, tears streaking her face. For the first time that night, her expression shifted, not into the sternness of denial, but into something like release. Relief, even. I will not fight you, she whispered. Do what I should have done long ago. The family gathered closer, some kneeling down to Lila's level, offering hesitant smiles, introductions, soft words of welcome. At first, she shrank back shyly, clutching her bear. But Harper held her hand through it all, whispering reassurance until little by little, Lila peeked up at the faces around her. For the first time in her life, she was not behind a locked door. The night stretched on, heavy with emotion, but lighter with hope. The truth had torn the family apart, it seems. But in doing so, it gave them a chance to stitch themselves back together, stronger and more honest than before. And as Harper tucked Lila into bed later that night, smoothing her hair gently and whispering a lullaby, she knew one thing for certain. The kitchen door that had once been a prison would never close on her cousin again. The story of secrets, prejudice, and regret had reached its end. But for Lila, a new story was just beginning. A story of freedom, family, and belonging. Thank you for watching this story. If it moved you, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Your voice matters. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss more powerful stories. Remember, every story has a lesson, and every lesson can change a life.